Hello again, I'm Bob Colt. We're continuing our conversations in Charlotte Public Schools, and Belinda Hoyle is joining us today. Belinda, you are the Director of Transportation, which means you are all things about the bus.
That I am.
And you go back a long way, including driving a bus at one time.
I did. I drove a bus for about 10 years. And since then, I've done some various things, dispatching and that sort of stuff, and ended here in Charlotte, and like it here. It's a great community.
What does the transportation director actually do?
The biggest thing I suppose I do is the scheduling, is keeping the making sure the buses are running as efficiently while still providing a good service to our families. That takes up the most part of my time. I think is scheduling, all the scheduling we do to keep the buses on schedule.
How do you keep the buses running on time?
Well, that's teamwork. That's teamwork, and they do with the mechanics and the driver. And our drivers here most of them have been here 20 years. I mean, our lowest seniority drivers are 10-year veterans.
Wow.
It's a great group of people, and they know the community, they know the kids, they know the roads that are more difficult, the roads that are easier in the wintertime. They know all those things, and they do a great job staying on schedule. I mean, our buses are on time. I don't have a percentage, but I would say between 95 and 99% they're on time.
No kidding.
So, great.
So, Belinda, in your role as transportation director, you coordinate all of the bus routes and determine where they go and what time they pick up young people. And how in the world do you possibly keep track of all that?
Well, we have a lot of help. We have our software now, our routing software, and we have our GPS systems on all of our buses that tell us where they are at what time. So we can keep a good track on, if they're getting there where they should be on time, and getting to the schools on time, and it helps a lot.
And so with GPS, that actually allows you to know where your stops are and the streets are, and kind of coordinate them and put them on a map.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more. It's a little more reactive than proactive. It tells us where they've been more than where they're going to be.
Really?
Yeah. So where I can look back and see if drivers are inconsistent, because inconsistency for kids and families is really hard. I can look back and see if there's that if they're getting there at the right time, and if they're getting to school on time, that kind of thing. More reactive to what has happened.
Now, when you say a GPS, are you meaning that the bus drivers are actually putting in locations, or are you actually tracking the buses in real time?
Tracking.
Tracking.
Yeah, we're actually tracking. And there's a few second delay. We can pull up on a screen and see where they are.
So it's kind of like radar.
Yes.
As you
kind of
look,
like air traffic controller. Yeah.
Air traffic controller. You know where the buses are at what time.
Right.
And so, if most of the buses run on time, what are some of the problems that usually occur?
Well, as any, with vehicles like buses or cars, there are some mechanical breakdowns that that occur sometimes. Sometimes, there may be an issue with, student behavior that the bus has to pull over because you can't handle, students and drive if there's an issue going on at the same time. So that could happen, as well as weather. Sometimes the weather, they drive a little slower sometimes in the wintertime. Our dirt roads can be icy for a month at a time because they never thaw. So they're going a little slower then. But those are our biggest issues.
So let's break it down in the mechanics then. Just focus on the mechanics first. How many buses do you have? And you have to have people working full time to keep those buses rolling, right?
Well, we do. We have a one mechanic. He does we also contract some work for Potterville, so we do some of do all of their transportation as well. So in Charlotte we have 16 regular routes. 15 of them have high school and elementary students on them, separately. And then one of them has only elementary students. So we have 15 high school, middle school routes and 16 elementary routes and upper L. And he is responsible for all the buses, and he works full time. From 6 in the morning, or at 5:30 he shows up to about 1:30 in the afternoon. And then we have a mechanic helper position that is currently open. So he could use some help for some of those things that hooking up cameras and that kind of stuff. But he doesn't have any help right now.
So that's something you have to do. Not only do the maintenance to keep the buses rolling, but you also have to monitor some of the student behavior and track them with cameras. So how is that done?
Well, for the most part, the kids are really well behaved. I mean, they understand, and parents understand the importance of bus safety, and what happens when behavior is an issue and it puts everyone's life in danger. The kids on the bus, other drivers on the road. So they're really supportive. We partner together with parents, ask them to help us out, and they usually do. So we use the cameras, and the cameras are not 100% dependable because of this nature of it. Because they might not catch that angle. They might not.
Yeah.
The kids might be behind the seat. They may not. It may not work that well all the time. But there's been many times we've been able to pull it out and be able to see what the truth in the middle lies. When you ask the same kids the same question, you might get a different answer sometimes.
So if a young person knows that a camera's on them and recording their behavior during the bus ride, they're going to act better. Yeah, it helps.
Right.
And the bus driver who's really focusing on the road, which is what they should do, then doesn't have to necessarily deal with student behavior.
Right.
And how important is it that students behave on a bus?
Well, the big thing is that, as everyone knows, there are no seatbelts on a school bus. And the reason for that is the way they're made, the way they're built. And they are built to contain children, students, the riders, in case of some kind of impact. Where, seatbelts keep them in their seat, the way the steel construction keeps them like eggs in a carton, keeps them kind of compartmentalized. And when the bus is full, it's actually a better situation because the kids are seated more properly in the seats. And that's where the important thing is, why it's so important for kids to stay seated. If they're standing in a bus or walking around or not sitting with their back to the back, their seat to the bottom, and they're facing the front, then it kind of equates to not wearing your seatbelt in the car. It puts you in a position where if something did happen, it could be a disastrous outcome.
So, would a seatbelt in the bus be a bad thing?
I think so, because I think what happens, there's been a lot of studies about a lot of information, and what's come out at this point is that, as long as kids are seated properly, the school bus is the safest place for a student to ride to and from school.
Because it's a big, heavy vehicle and protected.
Right. Yeah, and because the way that it's built with all the steel construction, I mean the bumpers are, if a car hits the back end of a bus, it goes under the bus, beneath where the students are sitting, and not hitting the side of it. That for most cars are lower, and if there was an incident where there was a electrical fire or something, and a driver had to get 70 kids out of seatbelts, in the short amount of time they have, they couldn't. It would be, it would be difficult to do that. So when you weigh the safety issues, the seatbelts in a bus would keep kids maybe seated, staying in their seat easier, and maybe not moving around so much. But then if there's an emergency, it would be difficult to get them out in time.
So you've driven a bus though yourself for many years.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would be curious to know, when you drive a car, it seems to be a learned skill that you accommodate, but it must be hard to drive a bus.
Yeah, well, driving a bus is, you do have to learn how.
Yeah.
But the biggest issue is maintaining that concentration and not getting distracted by what's happening behind you. By remembering the drivers, they have a lot of training in the very beginning, and they go every 2 years for Con Ed, so that they can learn new things about new laws, better ways to handle student behavior and that kind of thing. But the biggest thing that drivers learn, is to keep that focus on the road. And they have all the mirrors, and they have a sequence where they're checking the mirrors, regularly, so they can catch some of those things, but that they are still focused on driving.
And October was actually Bus Safety Month, and I think the law enforcement folks are very concerned that drivers know the law around buses. Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, when those signs are out and the lights are going, you cannot pass a bus. You have to stop,
Absolutely.
Right?
There are two kinds of stops. There are hazard light stops and red light stops. The hazard light stops are when just the hazard lights are going, like your flashers in your car. When those are going, and those are only approved in certain places under certain conditions, cars can pass the bus. Kids are not ever crossing in those situations. It's legal to pass in that situation, and they're always reviewed to make sure that they are legal hazard light stops. They find that the less you control traffic, the better it is. So whenever there's a place where we can put a hazard light stop, we do. But in the situations where we can't, where it doesn't meet the legal requirements, then we have a red light stop. And the yellow lights will come on first, they'll give you a warning, and that they have to happen 200 feet before the stop. And then when they open the door, the red lights will come on. And absolutely, you know, when the red lights are on, you cannot pass a school bus. This is one of the very few laws that where a police officer can actually issue you a ticket just on a report from the bus driver. So
Really?
Yes. So if the bus driver, you know, gets your license plate number and describes your car and sends it in, the police department will mail you a ticket.
And it's an expensive ticket.
Oh, it is. It is. It's very expensive, and I'm sorry. I'm thinking it's about $500, I think.
Yeah.
And several points on your license.
And so, tell us again, what is the safety issue? Children who are moving from all sorts of directions, from the bus and to the bus, it's kind of like a beacon, and so it's a pretty hazardous situation.
Absolutely, because you even though we spend a lot of time teaching the kids, you never know what a 5-year-old's going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know what a 15-year-old's going to do. Yeah, they're still children. So on occasion, they may forget their safety rules, and that's why it's important for all traffic to stop. You know, when it is, and that's why the hazard light stops only occur when they are on the door side of the bus, so that there isn't such a
Yeah, and
problem with that.
when you figure out the routes, you obviously have to go get the kids where they are or near where they are. So do you segment the students who ride on the bus based on grade or family? How do you do that?
How they sit on the bus, or how they pick them up?
How you pick them up.
Well, we do have certain policies in place for our students. Elementary is a little different than high school and middle school. We try to make the routes efficient and still stop in an area close to a student's home. We ask, sometimes we can't always get a bus stop that's got sidewalks or that's well lit or is in a place where parents can see them from their door. So I encourage parents to accompany their kids to the bus stop. There's a lot of places where kids are unsupervised at bus stops, and that's just really not a good thing. If parents are there, then it's never a good thing to send kids anywhere unsupervised. So it's nice to have parents at bus stops. But we do the best we can to get it, within a reasonable range. We have certain policies for elementary. In town, we have them every couple of blocks, and kids, come from blocks around. In the country, for most of the elementary kids, we do stop at their driveway. But for high school, middle school, we do have a half a mile from home to stop policy. So, depending on where all the students are located, the route, the efficiency of the route, students may have to go up to half a mile to a bus stop, and that's where we count on parents to get them there safely.
And so during the winter, you try to make the routes as efficient as possible because you don't want kids standing outside waiting for the bus, and that must be a challenge. Oh,
it is, especially because there are times when there are delays. But still, in the wintertime, for the most part, buses are on time. Parents should probably always expect the bus to be on time, but plan for the unexpected.
Yeah.
Because if there is a delay, the kids should really be dressed appropriately, with the proper outside gear in case they have to wait for a little bit longer for the bus.
And so a bus driver must know more about the roads than people from the road commission.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. They know where all the potholes are. They know which roads, are just do better in the wintertime and which ones don't. And we try to keep on the same routes every year. So they get to know the kids. They get to know their habits and that kind of thing, and it works out good.
Now, school, for instance, in the winter is often determined on whether or not the buses can run.
Right.
So how do you make that call?
It's a tough call. It's a tough call because you're balancing that disruption and possibly kids being home alone during the day and with the safety of them getting to school. We go out, we actually drive the roads. I do, and also the Mark Rosecrans does. And then we talk with people in other communities around us, and we try to come together to see if the buses can travel safely. It's, ice is worse than snow. A couple inches of snow really isn't a lot for a school bus that's so heavy.
And you make that call early.
We do it early. Try to get it called by 5 o'clock so that parents can plan as best they can at last minute for the day.
And sometimes you make a call in anticipation of what weather will be.
Right. You just never know. And I'll tell you what, it seems like if you plan a storm coming and you make that call that we're not going to have school, you better believe we're not gonna get a storm that day, you know. And then you know the storm's coming at 6 o'clock, and you know you're watching the radar and you're thinking, wow, you know, I mean, should we call or not? And then you decide not to, and the roads are a little bit more hazardous than you expected, and then that's when the driver's, you know, experience comes in. They take it slow. You know, and they do the best they can. We ask the kids, you know, to stand back a little further from the roads than normal, so that if there's any slipping and sliding, that it's not. And more probably from other vehicles than from the bus. The bus knows where the kids are going to be, whereas, you know, other vehicles may not.
So what do you tell young people? What is good bus behavior, and how are they supposed to act? What are they supposed to do before they get on the bus, and then when they do get on the bus?
There are a few rules that are really important. One of them is to be at your bus stop on time, 5 minutes before the scheduled time, and to be waiting at the bus stop, not to be waiting in the car, not to be waiting in the house or in the garage or down the road or walking to the bus stop, because when you're rushing, that is when you forget your safety rules. And the driver is required by law to count the kids as they're coming up to the stop. And then as they get on the bus, to make sure that you know, if there's 5 kids standing there, that 5 kids get on the bus, so no one's dropped something in underneath the bus, or something, or you know, they're in a place where the bus can't see them. So it's hard for the driver to count those kids if they're coming from all different directions. They really need to be at the stop. That's a huge rule. And then once they board the bus, sitting properly in the seat, that keeps them safe. And you know, using inside voices, talking to kids that are just sitting with them, so that they're not distracting the driver while she's driving. Those are probably the 3 biggest safety rules that.
And so, how are the kids? Are they well behaved in Charlotte?
They are. They are very well behaved.
It makes your job easy.
Right. It does. You know, we do have incidents, obviously, you know, with their kids. But you know, when we talk with parents, we almost always get cooperation from our parents, and they partner with us to make sure that the kids are behaving on the bus, you know, or behaving on the bus. We all want them to be safe, and that's the most important thing.
It's really not an easy job. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of effort, and it's also an expensive thing to do, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit. I don't think people really understand the investment that the school district makes in transportation.
Right. Well, you know, just the vehicle itself is huge. The kind of wear and tear that you put on a bus, they require, you know, that you are replacing them regularly, maintaining them regularly in order to keep them running. A new school bus costs between, you know, $85,000 and $92,000. It lasts for about 12 years, and 10 to 12, you know, and then they're going to put as a spare maybe for a couple, so they're using occasionally, and then they have to be replaced. And it's really important that they're on a cycle that, you know, that keeps the older vehicles out and the newer vehicles in. We're recently able to purchase 5 propane buses, and that has been, you know, that's just a great thing for the district, for our students, for the environment, economically as well as environmentally.
Well, what's the difference between a propane bus and a regular bus?
A regular bus runs on diesel, which is, you know, there are a lot of regulations for equipment that have reduced the emissions on diesels, but still, propane is a much cleaner burning fuel. It's a much cheaper fuel. It's domestic. There's, you know, the emissions when you think about the kids that are, you know, boarding the bus, riding on the bus, you know, when the buses are running near the schools. All that it's a cleaner burning fuel. Economically, it's cheaper to maintain. The buses are the engines, the parts, the oil, all that is cheaper, much cheaper on a propane bus. And while it doesn't get quite as good a gas mileage per mile as a diesel bus, the cost of propane is less than half.
Yeah.
So
most districts engage transportation. They probably really don't have to do it, but for a district like Charlotte, you really do have to do it, don't you, to get the kids to school? Right.
It's not a legal requirement. We're not required to provide transportation, but we do know that the service we provide, you know, is one of the things that helps ensure that some kids get to school every day. Yeah. It'd be really hard for parents and for children to get there every day if they didn't have, that school bus that comes to pick them up.
And so, is all of your transportation in the district, or do you take kids out for special events and activities?
We do. We do a lot of field trips during the day, and then we also do all the athletic, you know, sporting events, and go all over the place for that, depending on where they are. And
so, if you cycle new buses in, and you purchased about 5 buses.
Yeah, we did.
And so, a bus is going to last 12 years. Do you cycle them in a pattern where some are running in the city and some are running out, and you know, obviously there must be a whole maintenance
Right.
program that you have to engage
Right.
that's pretty scientific.
Right, well, we try to keep the number of miles that are on a bus, consistent with the year of the bus, so that I don't have, one 2013 bus that has 100,000 miles on it and one that's got 50, because then you have, that, I mean, more than just age, there's also mileage you have to consider when you're considering replacing buses. We were in a unique position this year when we bought, or last year when we bought the propane buses, because our district, approved a bond. The community, supported us greatly and gave us money to buy 4 new buses. And we had planned on doing, 2 one year and 2 the next in order to help maintain that schedule. However, the EPA offered a grant that allowed us to get an extra bus if we bought them all at the same time.
Great.
So we ended up buying at the same time, and we will do that that mileage really closely and try to cycle those buses so that we're able to, when it comes time to replace them, not have to do it all at one time.
Now you mentioned propane. Is there and that's new, but is there a lot of new technology on a bus today?
Oh, there is. I mean, it's a lot different from when I was riding a school bus, and even from when I first started driving, where we were manually shifting the bus. They're a lot nicer to drive. They don't have that big steering wheel they used to have, and they have the for maintenance purposes, it's all computer. You plug it in, you can see exactly what's wrong with the bus if it's not running properly. They have, we have the cameras now, the GPS. The propane is very, it heats up a lot faster than diesel engines, so it's more comfortable for kids and drivers. There's no plugging it in at night like you do a diesel engine. You have to plug it in to keep the block warm.
Yeah.
Do any of that? So there's a lot of things that are beneficial to driving the new buses these days.
And must be a little easier on maintenance.
Oh, it is, absolutely. I mean, it's I don't have any concrete numbers because we haven't had them long enough. I mean, when you're comparing the new propane to the 10-year-old diesel, we can't really compare those costs. But as time goes on, we're keeping accurate records so that we can see where exactly what we're doing. It's more like a gasoline engine, a lot less maintenance than a diesel engine.
What's the future of transportation, you think, in public schools? Do you think it'll always have a role where we'd be asking parents to contribute more and drive their kids to different places to hook up with a bus? Where do you think this is going to go in the future?
Well, the economy has forced us to draw back on some of the services that we've traditionally provided, such as our high school, middle school kids walking up to, or being half a mile from their home for the bus stop. From sports trips, a lot often on Saturdays we don't do a return trip. We drop the team off, and then we come back, and then parents are responsible for getting them home. So those are some of the things that we've had to do. Increased walk areas and that kind of thing in order to maintain that service for the kids that to get everybody to school. Trying to get everyone as a whole, it's been difficult. It's difficult choices we've had to make. So I think that depends on the economy. It depends on where we're at, what we're able to allot toward transportation.
Well, Belinda, thank you very much for joining us. We've run out of time. It was so easy to talk to you, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. I'm Bob Colt, and we'll continue our conversations in Charlotte Public Schools.